We begin tonight with an I-Team special report. A local child protective service agency drops the ball, mishandling the case of a teacher accused of sexually abusing a student. The mistake allowed the teacher back into a local classroom for years. An investigation by Scott McFarland and our NEWS4 I-Team reveals the error and a loophole in local law that experts say could put more children at risk. Scott?
Yeah, Doreen, good evening. The teacher has denied these accusations from the start. It was never criminally charged, but Child Protective Service officials say he should not have been allowed back in the classroom. Yet that's where he ended up, almost immediately. Zevlyn Staten wasn't just a teacher, but an assistant principal in Arlington Public Schools, until Staten's name surfaced in a he said, she said case. In 2013, a former student told investigators that in 2006, when she was in third grade, Staten forced her to engage in oral sex in the closet of his classroom at Claremont Elementary, and then again when she was in fourth and fifth grade. Police investigated but never filed charges, citing lack of evidence. Staten was put on leave, then he resigned, and to this day he denies the accusations. But in September 2013, Arlington County Child Protective Services found Staten engaged in a level 1 sex offense, finding there was clear and convincing evidence the abuse happened, immediately putting him on a state child abuse and neglect registry, which isn't public but disqualifies him from teaching again.
When it says a level 1 sexual offense, that's a significant sexual offense?
Yes, this is a serious situation that needs to be addressed in the most controlled way possible.
Child abuse counselor Ileana Gill of Virginia says Staten's teaching career should have ended there.
My opinion would be that that would disqualify that person from ever having contact with children again. That's a very serious situation.
But an investigation by the NEWS4 I-Team reveals Staten's teaching career never even slowed. The same month he was found to have engaged in misconduct by Arlington Child Protective agents, Staten started a new assistant principal job at Thomas Johnson Middle School in Prince George's County. How did he slip through the cracks and into a classroom again? Staten appealed his case to State Social Services in Richmond. That allowed his name to be pulled from the child abuse registry, which would have flagged other schools from hiring him, including Prince George's County, where he'd go on to work for more than 3 years.
I feel betrayed.
With hundreds of students, including Dwight Francis's daughter.
It gives me a feeling in my stomach as if, do I need to talk to my child in a certain type of way to try and find out if anything may or may not have happened.
In 2015, while he worked in Maryland, his case was heard by state officials in Virginia who sustained the finding he'd engaged in sexual misconduct. Under Virginia state law, his license should have been pulled and his name added back to the registry. But state education records obtained by the I-Team show that didn't happen. Arlington County Human Services failed to notify the public schools what they'd found, that a former teacher had engaged in a major sex offense, even though Arlington County Human Services works just across the hall from Arlington Public Schools. The agency also failed to notify the state education department to pull Staten's teaching license. Charles Pyle of the Virginia Department of Education didn't speak about Staten's case, but said such a mistake by Child Protective Services is a violation of state law.
If one agency, doesn't carry out that responsibility, there's the potential of a window being opened, a window for an individual to move to another state and secure a license in another state, or just move to another district here in Virginia.
Arlington County Child Protective Services declined multiple requests for an interview and said it couldn't answer specific questions about the case. But in a written statement said the county will look into and address any report that a required notification was not received, and also ensure that its protocols are updated. Staten finally quit his Maryland teaching job in January 2017 and lost his Virginia teaching license in May 2017, but only after Arlington Public Schools decided to check back on whatever happened to him, and after discovering he'd been found to have engaged in a sex offense and had been teaching all the while in Maryland.
Allowing someone to continue to work and have access to other children is just a very egregious situation because we have the safety of children to consider.
Zevlyn Staten declined to be interviewed and quit Thomas Johnson Middle in Lanham, Maryland in January.
Tonight, the I-Team is working for you to get some answers.
They found the D.C. government isn't raising red flags to warn schools across the nation when a teacher admits to abusing a child. Investigative reporter Scott McFarland joins us now with the latest in his continuing series. Very disturbing, Scott.
For 2 years, the I-Team has investigated sex abusers in Virginia and Maryland who we found slipped through the cracks and landed new teaching jobs.
We've also been looking into D.C. schools to determine if there were problems there, too. And what we discovered surprised us, and it alarmed safety experts. D.C. doesn't even have a system for revoking teaching licenses, even from those who admit to crime.
Giovanni Pena was once Teacher of the Year at Oyster Adams School in D.C., the most popular with kids, parents say. Now, he's a felon, just released from prison.
Even talking about it just makes me sad.
He taught Dion Bell's son in 4th grade before admitting sexually abusing a different student.
The first talk is about, did this happen to you? And that talk is a very scary talk.
Pena pleaded guilty 2 years ago this month.
The whole community just, everybody was in mourning, basically.
In most cases like this, a teacher like Pena would be formally listed on a national database called NASDAQ. That list formally red flags 78,000 teachers nationwide, many of whom engaged in misconduct, flagging them to education officials in every state in the nation to ensure they can't cross state lines and try to get new teaching licenses and access to kids again. But the NEWS4 I-team found Pena isn't on the list, and we found other names missing too. John Solano, who pleaded guilty and was imprisoned in 2013 for sex misconduct at McKinley Tech, and Charles Young, who last year pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting students at Dunbar High. Pena, Solano, and Young all share one thing in common. They taught in D.C.
And if they lost their certificate, they are to be in our system.
Phil Rogers runs the national database of teacher license revocations.
It would be very strange that there were no teachers in D.C. who had misconduct that resulted in them losing their certificate.
Seems almost impossible.
Yes.
But our investigation reveals since 2008, the D.C. Office of State Superintendent of Education, which oversees teacher licenses in the district, has revoked 0 teacher licenses for misconduct and added 0 of their names to the national database.
Since the teacher did go to jail, the teacher was publicly humiliated, but that's not enough. The teacher should not be allowed to teach ever again.
Other states, including Virginia and Maryland, approved regulations allowing them to revoke teacher licenses years or decades ago. In D.C., the regulations to do so are not yet final. The D.C. Office of State Superintendent of Education allowed Pena, Solano, and Young's licenses to simply expire. No red flag raised to other states and other schools.
We want highly qualified, effective teachers in front of every student every day, and there may be cases where that's not happening.
D.C. State Board of Ed member Joe Whedon says that leaves kids vulnerable in and outside of D.C.
We're putting someone else's child at risk of being put in a situation where they shouldn't be.
Somebody over the district line in Maryland or Virginia.
Exactly.
Safety experts say the problem goes deeper than just public schools. Unlike in almost every other state in the nation, in D.C., charter school teachers are not required to have a license, which means there's no license to revoke. No formal way to warn the nation if a teacher is accused of abuse in D.C.'s growing charter school system.
Including the case of Alan Coleman, arrested last year when a former student came forward and accused him of sexually abusing her at the KIPP D.C. Key Academy back in 2004. Coleman has pleaded not guilty.
We've got to have ways to make sure that there are red flags when they need to be there.
Child abuse therapist Ileana Gill says allowing charter schools to hire teachers without licensure puts kids at risk.
Everybody has to participate. I mean, it takes a village. I mean, we really do as a community have to all be participating in whatever small or large way we can to make sure that kids are safe.
The school board overseeing D.C. charter schools says it does not require licenses so as to give schools more flexibility in how they hire, but says it requires background checks on any candidate. But the I-team found background checks sometimes fail. According to a police report, the administrator of KIPP Academy suspected Coleman had an inappropriate relationship with the student in 2004, asked him to stand down, and didn't renew his contract. We contacted KIPP Academy about that report, and they told us at the time if there was evidence of the misconduct Mr. Coleman was later charged with, we would have immediately alerted the appropriate authorities, and that the inappropriate relationship referenced in the report was professional in nature. Months later, Coleman was able to get a new job with nearby Capital City Charter School. In this letter to parents, Capital City says it ran a background check on Coleman and that it came back clean. They sent that letter last year after police arrested Coleman for the alleged 2004 misconduct.
Without the constraints of the licensure requirements, that they're able to do things a little bit differently. Whether or not that outweighs the risk is a question that I certainly have, but the law is the law.
We checked and found Alan Coleman was able to get another teaching job in Florida. A school spokesperson there tells the I-Team he was terminated last summer. We tried reaching out to all the teachers in this report. We did not hear back. We did hear from D.C.'s Office of State Superintendent, which says it hopes to have these revocation policies finalized in the district by 2018 or 2019.
Tonight, major questions about whether a local school district dropped the ball, possibly putting other children at risk.
The school fired a teacher suspected of sexually abusing a girl, but an investigation by the NEWS4 I-Team reveals it's what they did not do next that raised concerns. Here's investigative reporter Scott McFarland.
Did the Florida school know about your history in D.C.?
Alan Coleman is headed to prison. Question is, should he have been sent there much sooner? For 10 years, Coleman worked as a social studies teacher at Northwest D.C.'s Capital City Public Charter School. But in March 2015, his career there ended in an instant. Because this history teacher had a history. Capital City Public Charter fired Coleman after learning he was suspected of sexually abusing a former student from a different school for years. Though Coleman lost his job, his life remained surprisingly the same. Months later, he found a new teaching job here, Eastside High School, Gainesville, Florida. The NEWS4 I-Team obtained his job application and found these endorsements from his Capital City Public Charter colleagues. School leaders in Florida tell the I-Team they did a reference check with the former principal at Capital City Charter.
We were told that this was an employee who was an excellent teacher, who brought a lot of positives to his school.
It wasn't until more than a year later, D.C. police came calling on Coleman to investigate those abuse allegations, leading us to wonder how he slipped through the cracks. School, police, and court records compiled by the I-Team reveal the timeline of events. Take a look at this. According to a police report, Coleman's contract at another charter school, KIPP Academy, was not renewed in 2004 after the administrator there suspected him of having an inappropriate relationship with a student. When contacted by the I-Team, the school said had there been any evidence of misconduct, it would have called the authorities. In February 2015, Coleman was in his 10th year teaching at Capital City Charter when the school learned about the earlier abuse allegations involving Coleman and put him on leave immediately and fired him within days. D.C. police say they weren't notified about Coleman's crime until April 2016, and not by Capital City, but by the victim herself. They arrested and charged Coleman with child sex abuse weeks later. But Capital City didn't notify its school community, its parents, about Coleman's case until May 2016, 14 months after it fired Coleman. The school sent this letter to parents saying, "We've been cooperating with the appropriate district officials and were asked to keep the matter confidential so as not to jeopardize their investigation." Months after that letter, D.C. police began investigating the school itself for failure to report a suspected sex offense. The D.C. Office of Attorney General says it's deliberating whether to file criminal charges against Capital City.
We asked officials with the Capital City Charter School to go on camera and explain their side of the story. They would not.
So we submitted written questions, which they declined to answer, instead issuing a statement saying we're confident that we discharged our responsibilities properly in this matter. We've cooperated with law enforcement in all phases of its investigation.
Everybody has to participate. I mean, it takes a village.
Child abuse therapist Ileana Gill says school districts are required by law to pass along suspicions of abuse. D.C. police wouldn't discuss their investigation of Capital City Charter School, but said D.C. law requires not only school leaders, but all adults to report suspected sex abuse to police.
In essence, it ensures the safety and well-being of all children here in the district.
Whether you're a school or just a citizen.
Correct.
Wanted to see if you'd like to give us any kind of response to your case.
Coleman pleaded guilty to child sex abuse in late October. He wouldn't answer our questions about his crime or how his former school responded. Scott McFarland, NEWS4 I-Team.
D.C.'s Attorney General says individuals who fail to report suspected child abuse could face a maximum of 6 months in jail. The I-Team has been investigating teacher abuse for more than 2 years now. You can watch their entire series right on your phone. Just visit our NBC Washington app and click on Investigations.
Virginia state leaders now considering new law to more easily remove teachers accused of sexually abusing their students. A formal legislative hearing here in Richmond because of what the NEWS4 I-Team found last month.
Right now, apparently, the alleged perpetrator can just continue to ask for a delay, and nothing ever comes to closure.
At a state legislative hearing here, legislators said loopholes like that are dangerous and should be changed.
We're giving you a license to practice in our state, and we should have certain standards, and the first standard should be the health and safety of the children you're going to be with.
Our investigation found D.C. is trying to, but hasn't even finished its policies for revoking teacher licenses, even though every other state, including Maryland and Virginia, did so years ago or decades ago. D.C.'s Office of State Superintendent of Education tells us it's trying to finish those policies, but might not until 2018 or 2019.
Hopefully we can get it done quickly and make sure that students in the district are covered.
D.C. Council Education Chairman David Grasso tells the I-Team he will meet formally with OSSE, the state superintendent of education, to talk about whether revocation policies can be finished sooner.
It sounds like we've been bogged down a little bit in the bureaucracy of the program and not really moving towards a real proactive solution to it. So let's get this done and get it done quickly.
Mayor Muriel Bowser's deputy mayor for education tells us handbooks with the new revocation policies will be ready within months. We wanted to talk to the mayor about the timing of these fixes, but her staff told us she wasn't available to do so.
Bowser, Scott with Channel 4.
When we did catch up with Mayor Bowser, she confirmed regulations are in the works.
We operate a fantastic school district.
Shouldn't this have been done years ago, like it was in other states?
I can't talk about years ago. I'm the mayor now, and our OSSE will make sure that we have the most robust regulations that our district requires.
Should it happen sooner than 2019?
I've answered your questions, and you're not going to chase me. Thank you.